Bienvenidas y bienvenidos al cuarto capítulo de Sin Fronteras. Nos encontramos en el estado de Illinois, en la ciudad de Chicago y específicamente junto al memorial de Haymarket. En este lugar se recuerdan los hechos ocurridos los primeros días de mayo de 1886 en el marco de la lucha por las 8 horas de jornada laboral. Durante este capítulo precisamente estaremos en la marcha del 1 de mayo aquí en la ciudad de Chicago, compartiendo también con los compañeros de la sede central de la IWW y conociendo la realidad de la comunidad puertorriqueña, como también la situación del prisionero político Óscar López. Así que ya lo saben, esto es Sin Fronteras y no se lo pueden perder.
Well, now we have more gas going off here. Let's see. Richard, is that your perspective there?
I am live at 4th and University. What you are seeing is that tension spilling over that we just talked about a while ago down at 4th and Union. People kept pushing the police line and pushing the police line and pushing the police line. Now we're seeing a wide variety of response from that police team. As you mentioned before, we've seen this. It is most likely a combination of perhaps smoke grenades and pepper gas in canisters that's being released.
Chicago, also known as the Windy City, is a city of nearly 2.75 million people. With Lake Michigan to the east and suburban sprawl on all of their sides, the city is divided into many neighborhoods which tend to be segregated along racial and economic lines. The city is 45% white, 32.9% black, 28.9% Latino, and 5.5% Asian. 22.6% of individuals live below the poverty line, and the average income is $47,270. Chicago is well known as a center for livestock processing, with its famous or infamous stockyards, and much of this industry remains today, along with manufacturing, printing and publishing, insurance, and a newly popular tech startup sector. The neighborhoods and makeup of the city's population are changing rapidly, with skyrocketing property values pushing gentrification. Between the 2014 and 2015 census, the city lost nearly 3,000 residents, and that trend appears to continue.
This is the General Headquarters building. It's been here in this site for a couple years. Before that, it was in a different location. It had to move due to a fire. It's paid for by membership dues. It's where the majority of the administrative work of the union goes on. It's been for the majority of the life of the IWW. It's been located in Chicago, but it's also been in other places like the San Francisco Bay Area, Ohio, Pittsburgh, some other places.
The purpose of this department is to provide education materials to membership and also to anybody worldwide who might be interested in learning more, either about the history of the IWW or of labor organizing in general, people who are talking about their direct experiences within the workplace, within their communities, and providing methods for how other people might be able to overcome those issues and to organize their fellow workers. We've also got a lot of books about worldwide struggles, whether it's labor organizing, community organizing, environmental issues, gender issues, race issues. We've got a really great variety of books that explain all of the struggle that the working class has gone through.
IWW began in 1905 in the United States. It was a meeting and a grouping of different unions, radical unions in the United States at that time. It included the Western Federation of Miners. They initially began and were involved in a number of campaigns, rapidly built up their membership, and they were headquartered here in Chicago at that time too. A number of years later, after growing larger and larger, they were actually kind of undercut by the United States government in the Palmer Raids, which were a series of raid-baiting tactics used by the government to cut down the union. Since then, they shrunk in size considerably, but then have considerably come back in the past 30 years or so. Now, the IWW might be smaller than a lot of other unions in the United States, but it pursues a much different strategy of trying to create membership that's organizers in themselves. In this, the IWW emphasizes OT 101, so an organizer training 101 for members. We don't rely on paid organizers. We instead try to get every member up to being able to organize their own shop. We also organize industrially and not as a trade, which means that we don't have members in different unions contradicting members in other unions. And we also have dual carters, so we have people who are members of the IWW but also work in other union shops and try to build militant shop floor organizations there.
The experience has been very good and empowering. It's the reason why we picked IWW to be our union representatives in our workplace. They pretty much gave us autonomy, where the workers, we organized the campaign ourselves. We make all the decisions on the campaign. We chose when we wanted to go public that we were forming a union, and IWW provided support, legal support, like knowledge, but we made all the decisions. They allowed us to bargain as long as needed, and we're still bargaining almost 2 years. No other union will allow that. So, and they allowed us to do a lot of legal pressures and legal technique and direct action things to add pressure on the employer to, give us a safe working environment.
If you can tell us about the experience in the railroad.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You can continue.
All right. At this place in the railroad, our company is named Mobile Rail Solutions, and we are subcontractors, which means we don't work directly for railroad, but we provide service for multiple railroad companies. Subcontractors' safety requirements are different than safety requirements if you work for the railroad. So in the railroad, a lot of the things that would be, there's a lot of oversight for safety. Subcontractors, not so much oversight. So we had to climb tall structures, 12 feet, 15 feet in the air, no protection, no protected ladder. So we made videos of the safety hazards and put it on YouTube. So the government would see, safety regulators would see. This brought fines to the company. These are things that helped get a lot of our safety requirements done, but we also learned that they have law for the railroad for certain safety requirements, but for the subcontractor, no law. So they didn't want to provide us hard hats, gloves, vests, but we needed to have the job. So they would give it to us one time and say we have to buy it after that. Railroad workers would give us things because our employer wouldn't give it to us. This is something that we use to agitate the workers around in unionizing to get those type of things done.
Revolution, very far to the left. Revolution, very far to the left.
Nos encontramos en Union Square, en el lugar de la convocatoria para una nueva conmemoración del 1 de mayo aquí en Chicago. Vamos a estar conversando con los asistentes para conocer sus impresiones durante la manifestación.
This is an anniversary of a very important day in the work for the world's working class. May Day came about as a result of events centered around the 8-hour day, okay, as a political movement back in the 1880s. In this city in 1886, there was essentially an event that led to, at that time there was some police were killed, there was a bombing, there were demonstrations for the 8-hour day. To this day, we don't know who even threw this bomb or whatever. But as a consequence, some anarchists, because that was what the movement was at that time, were arrested, and about 8 of them were found guilty. 4 of them were executed. 1 committed suicide. But it was out of that this event became a worldwide phenomenon.
The reason I'm here because we have been in oppression for way too long. We have been an oppressed nation for way too long, and it's time for us to unite and stand together.
El abuso del trabajo no solamente es con el hombre, con el inmigrante, no más con la mujer, ya que la mujer es menos pagada que el hombre. En los trabajos de las empresas multinacionales que ofrecen trabajos aquí son trabajos de miseria.
Capitalism does not value people and for what they're worth. Everyone should be paid what they're worth. And technically there should be no money. Things should be done for the need and the betterment of society.
Hace pocos minutos se ha dado inicio a la manifestación que va a recorrer las calles de Chicago. La primera parada será en el Consulado de México, donde se va a protestar en solidaridad por la desaparición de los 43 estudiantes normalistas en Ayotzinapa.
We are indigenous, we are native, we are black, we are brown, we are white, we are united. This is not the first time that Chicago police has guarded this building and not allowed Mexican citizens to come in here. To denounce the terror that we see as Mexican citizens living in Chicago, to denounce the terror that we witness in our country and also here in the city of Chicago. And we're here to let these folks know this is our street, this is our building, and we will denounce and continue to denounce created by the left to disappear when we are.
We march through the neighborhoods to where the police brutality is. So some people are afraid to even come out and be in the streets. We march through my neighborhood. We march through some of the other young men's neighborhood, the Pilsen neighborhood, but they weren't afraid. So it's time for people to rise up and say, I'm not afraid. I want my voice to be heard.
Después de aproximadamente 3 horas de caminata, la marcha ha llegado a su fin aquí en la ciudad de Chicago. Vamos a aprovechar de conversar con algunos de los organizadores.
Unfortunately, in recent years, a lot of the trade unions in Chicago and across the country have become business unions, which are more interested in working with the state and working with the bosses to create an obedient workforce. The IWW is the Industrial Workers of the World. We are a union, but we're a radical anti-capitalist union. One of the reasons we wanted to start the coalition is to bring back the very important idea of workers' self-organization, so that the idea of unions is not voting for Democratic candidates or letting a service come to you, but it's actually organizing yourself in your workplaces so that you can improve the conditions of your lives and control the conditions of your workplace.
So many of us have been socially indoctrinated to identify with the oppressors, not to think of ourselves as working class people. So first we have to try and raise people's level of class consciousness. And then, as we're doing that, we're also organizing for worker control at the job sites and community control in working class neighborhoods. And then once we start doing that, then we can start getting more people to these rallies and using militant direct action tactics.
Esas fueron las palabras de Adolf Fischer, uno de los 4 mártires anarquistas que fueron ejecutados en la horca aquí en la ciudad de Chicago, a raíz de los sucesos ocurridos en 1886 en el marco de la huelga general que se inició el 1 de mayo. Hoy día, 129 años después, una nueva conmemoración en esta ciudad ha llegado a su fin, y pareciera que la deuda con la historia es más grande que nunca. Nos encontramos con José López, director ejecutivo del Centro Cultural Puertorriqueño aquí en la ciudad de Chicago. José, bienvenido a Sin Fronteras.
Gracias.
Cuéntanos, ¿cómo se inicia este centro cultural?
Bueno, aquí en este barrio se llevó a cabo una de las rebeliones más contundentes de la comunidad puertorriqueña en todos los Estados Unidos. Esa rebelión obviamente fue el pueblo organizado en una forma informal, ¿verdad? Pero para dirigirse contra los abusos y la situación de marginación que enfrentaban los puertorriqueños en los Estados Unidos. Y fue parte de toda la lucha que se dan en los 60 para verdaderamente mejorar las condiciones de los pueblos oprimidos dentro de los Estados Unidos. Así que hace 50 años que este pueblo se alzó en este vecindario, aquí en Humboldt Park, y desde ese entonces se inician una serie de gestiones que culminó en el 1973 con la fundación del Centro Cultural Puertorriqueño, que pretende enfrentarse y confrontar la realidad socioeconómica y cultural del pueblo puertorriqueño aquí en Chicago. Puerto Rico fue tomado en el 1898 por las tropas norteamericanas. Puerto Rico se convierte en un territorio no incorporado, que quiere decir que es una colonia de los Estados Unidos, y que verdaderamente la Corte Suprema de los Estados Unidos ha decretado que Puerto Rico pertenece a, pero no es parte de, los Estados Unidos.
Se le preguntó al pueblo, a la legislatura, si querían ser ciudadanos americanos. En voto de la legislatura, del voto en favor a la ciudadanía americana fueron nada, 0. El Estados Unidos después lo que hace es pasa lo que se llama el Jones Act en el 1917 y dice todo puertorriqueño es un ciudadano y el que no iba a ser un indocumentado en su propia isla.
Por un acto del Congreso se le impuso la ciudadanía norteamericana a los puertorriqueños, precisamente al momento que los Estados Unidos entraba a la Primera Guerra Mundial, que quería decir que en ese entonces los puertorriqueños podían ser reclutados al ejército de los Estados Unidos. En este caso, los puertorriqueños tenían que entregar su vida por la defensa de los Estados Unidos, que en sí no era nuestra patria, sino la nación que nos colonizaba. Puerto Rico no tiene derecho a participar del cuerpo político de los Estados Unidos. Nosotros no elegimos los senadores, no elegimos el presidente. En otras palabras, todas las leyes que se adoptan en los Estados Unidos se ejecutan en Puerto Rico, pero los puertorriqueños no tienen ningún derecho de participar de eso.
La educación sobre la historia de Puerto Rico no existe. Así que yo le puedo preguntar a un puertorriqueño en Puerto Rico quién es el padre de la patria puertorriqueña y más del 90% no sabe quién es. Pero si le pregunto quién es George Washington, sí me pueden contestar esa pregunta. Y eso es colonialismo clásico.
Tu hermano, Oscar López, actualmente se encuentra en prisión y está cumpliendo una larga condena.
Mi hermano actualmente es el preso político quizá en América Latina más antiguo y en los Estados Unidos entre los más que lleva años. Mi hermano fue juzgado por los mismos cargos que se le otorgan a Nelson Mandela, que es el cargo de conspiración sediciosa.
El 4 de abril de 1980, 11 de nosotros, 5 mujeres y 6 hombres fueron capturados y arrestados por nuestra participación en el movimiento independentista puertorriqueño. 11 de nosotros en el 1980, Oscar López Rivera en el 81 y 3 más en el 1983. Fuimos acusados de conspiración sediciosa, pero puertorriqueños no pueden ser sediciosos por la razón que aquí en la Corte Suprema de los Estados Unidos ha declarado que Puerto Rico no es parte de los Estados Unidos, sino es una posesión. Si no somos parte de este país, ¿cómo podemos ser sediciosos?
I think the fact that I was charged with seditious conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States speaks for itself. But the charge in reference to Puerto Ricans has always been used for political purposes. It goes back to 1936, the first time that a group of Puerto Ricans was put in prison was by using the seditious conspiracy charge. And this has always been a strictly political charge used against Puerto Ricans.
Oscar se ha convertido prácticamente en el personaje emblemático de la unidad puertorriqueña. También entre los puertorriqueños en los Estados Unidos goza de mucho apoyo, obviamente en este barrio que él fue parte de crear muchas de nuestras instituciones. Cuando él sale de Vietnam, mi hermano regresa a Chicago como veterano de la guerra de Vietnam y fue condecorado por sus actividades en contra del pueblo vietnamita. Él regresa a esta comunidad y se da cuenta que verdaderamente él no tenía tanto que luchar en contra de los vietnamitas, porque los vietnamitas verdaderamente estaban luchando contra un sistema colonial, contra una opresión extranjera y que hasta cierto punto era muy similar a la realidad puertorriqueña. Verdaderamente no hay razón alguna para mantenerlo en las cárceles de los Estados Unidos. Él es sin duda alguna un luchador por la independencia de Puerto Rico, ha sido un líder destacado de este barrio y nosotros ansiosamente esperamos su llegada a su casa.
José, muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo.
Voy a cantar un corrido de un prisionero de guerra. Su nombre es Oscar López, orgullo de los Rivera, por los años en la cárcel.
Sigan viendo Sin Fronteras.
Hemos llegado al final del cuarto capítulo de Sin Fronteras y nos encontramos con Novator, con quien vamos a estar compartiendo durante esta nueva sección musical. Novator, bienvenido a Sin Fronteras.
Thank you, I'm glad to be here.
¿Cuál es la relación que tiene tu música con los espacios de resistencia aquí en Chicago?
Well, first of all, a lot of the lyrics that I write about are political. I talk a lot about it being against the state, against capitalism, against fascism, and you know, there's not many rappers from Chicago who talk about that subject matter, so I feel like that alone is, it adds to it. But I've also, the first mixtape I released was a benefit for Jason Hammond, who was a political prisoner arrested in connection to an anti-fascist incident that happened in Tinley Park about 2 or 3 years ago. And so I've just, I put out that mixtape as a benefit for him. I've played shows for the same reason, mostly a lot of stuff connected to anti-fascist work and supporting of political prisoners who are involved in that work.
¿Cómo te iniciaste en la música y si nos puedes hablar un poco de este cambio en el estilo musical que ahora estás tocando?
Okay, I got into punk and metal music in high school through a friend, and it was very influential to me. I was always kind of into the more political aspects as far as the punk scene goes, whether it's anarcho-punk or peace punk or whatever. And just, after playing in bands and touring and putting out records for, somewhere between 7 to 10 years, I was kind of interested in doing a different style of music, and I always listened to rap since I was a little kid, and it's always something that, I wanted to do but wasn't sure if I could actually do it. So, the opportunity came and I just went with it, and I've been doing it for a year and a half now.
Hace 1 año y medio atrás sacaste un nuevo álbum. ¿Nos podrías hablar un poco sobre eso?
Yeah, the first thing I put out was a mixtape called Dystopian. It came out at the beginning of this year. It's 12 tracks. You can find that on Bandcamp. And the project I'm working on right now is called Suicide by Radio. It's going to be an EP, so 4 or 5 songs. And the artwork is going to be done by Andrei Buzikov, who does Toxic Holocaust and Municipal Waste artwork. And that's going to be coming out hopefully sometime in July.
Gracias por habernos acompañado en este nuevo capítulo de Sin Fronteras. Nos vemos en el siguiente y los dejamos con Novator.
Check, 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 check. You can hear it?
Snatch the rifle, kill the sheriff in the last saloon. My platoon of goons is evil like the Black Lagoon. Blast the goons so the boom would leave you in an open tomb. I'll be the one hitting my gun up in the poker room. So soon I might just sting you like a bumblebee. Humbly, I'll leave you like the sights some tumbleweed. Tomb the raid, RIP, drinking liquor, robbing banks. It's showdown in the sun, down my polar rank. Cast Boston, cast lucky, cause we gone slinging. Smith and Wesson, final blessing, leave your guts stinking. Blood drinking, brothers soon to feast upon your fucking corpse. 6-shooter in the holster while I ride my horse. A valiant stallion through the sea like an Italian. Gambino, make it bank like a casino. That's Crusader, 1880, member of the regulators. You see my latest caper, posted in your local paper.
We started a game we never got to finish. Play for blood, remember?
I've killed women and children. Killed just about everything that walks or crawls at one time or another. And I'm here to kill you, little bit.
I'll put you out of your misery. Say wham!
I'm gonna blow your head off.
The bounty's heightened, they want 5,000 for my capture. After my last escape, the scene was a disaster. But I shoot faster than any outlaw in the fucking West. Place your bets with no regrets, I'll be the master. It's undeniable, my mind is certifiable. You wanna beg a coach and my approach is indefinable. You find me likeable until my guns are blazing. Like a raging, you'll be shriveled, contemplating your evasion. The situation, my stallion died of dehydration. I passed up from a 2 and then I woke up in the station. Gave no indication that I'm busting out like Mosey, cause I'm looking like I'm Bonnie from the good, the bad, the ugly. God's watching me at all times, they trusted me. It's all in vain since I retreated from the custody. Trackers loving me, they worship me in person. Only rarely I escape before they make the reimbursement.
You want that gun, pick it up. Diane ain't much of a living boy.
Whatever happens, if he's still standing in the end, gun him down.
See, in this world, there's 2 kinds of people, my friend.